Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. Today's tutorial is a fun one because it's simple but really elegant, and it's a pair of earrings. And the way these are set, they're prong set earrings, but I want you to pay close attention to how it's set up, that bundle that we put together, because there's lots of different things you can do with it. So pay close attention to that. After the tutorial is over, I want you to also stay tuned for some hints and some things that you can do with this design. Alright, so if you're ready, let's head over to the bench and I'm going to show you how this is going to look. So let's take a quick look before we get started on what it is that we're going to be making. We're making a pair of earrings that are prong set earrings. So I've got my ear wires in here. These are all polished up and nice and cleaned up, ready to go. They're real simple to make, but there's lots of things that you can do with these, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video, so please stick around for that. Now, all of the tools and the material to make these are all down in the description below, so check that out. It gives you all the measurements, all the tools, plus also how you can find the tools that you need and the materials that you may need. So check that out. So if you're ready, let's get started. So I've gone ahead and I've cut all of my wire. And let me tell you what I've got here. I've got two 18 gauge round wires that are going to make up the earring. I measured these and cut them at 6 inches each. So I've got two of those because we're making two earrings. And then I've cut up four 18 gauge square wires, and these I've cut at 3 inches each. These are going to make up the prongs. So we have 4 of them because we're making 2 earrings, so you've got 2 of these square ones for each earring. Okay, so let's set these prong wires aside for just a minute, and we're going to start working with the 18 gauge round wire. And the first thing you want to do is you want to find the center of these. So since they're 6 inches, we're going to actually set up the whole cut and wrap area for the center of this wire. So find the center and mark it. So they're 6 inches, so we're going to mark this at 3. And I want you to, before we really kind of dive in too deep into this, I am going to give you instructions to make one earring. It's up to you to actually duplicate it on the second earring. It would be kind of ridiculous for me to continue to go through this whole process showing you on each earring. So we're just going to show you how to make one earring, and then you guys can take it from there. The next thing we need to do is from that center mark that we made, we need to measure to the left and to the right of that mark 1/4 of an inch, because that's going to be the length of our wrap area. It's going to be a 1/2 inch. So here's the center. We measured and marked to the left 1/4 of an inch, and then we measured and marked to the right 1/4 of an inch. That is the wrap area that we're going to be working with. Now that we've got our marking on this done, we need to do one thing before we can really proceed, and that is we need to take our bench block, and we need to take the area that we're going to actually wrap, this marked area, and we need to flatten it. And the reason why is so that it reacts well with the 2 square wires that we're putting on the side of it. So what we need to do is we just need to flatten it slightly. You don't need to do a lot of pounding on this, but notice I've got the 2 measured areas. These are the outsides of that wrap, and I put it at the corner of my bench block so that I only hit those areas. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to tap that center area just a little bit, just to make it easier on us to be able to wrap that. So I've just flattened it ever so slightly. I haven't put a huge dent in it, but it's just enough to where we are going to be able to set those 2 wires on the outside of this, and they'll stay kind of squared up with one another as we're working with them. So we don't want to make this too thin, so be careful. Now that we've got this center area measured and marked on both of our wires, we're going to now turn our attention to our square wire. Now straighten these wires out just so that they sit next to one another. And once you do get them straightened out how you want them, square them up next to each other and then kind of even up the ends. And I want you to just take a piece of painter's tape, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a flag on each end just so that we hold them together. We want to make our measurements on this piece also. It's just much easier when you have them taped to one another. Take your ruler, and what we're going to do is we're going to find the center of this. So we cut these at 3 inches, so the center would be 1.5 inches. And then from that 1.5 inches, we're going to go to the left and to the right 1/4 inch, just as we did on the other one. So to the left, 1/4 inch, to the right, 1/4 inch. That will be our cut and wrap area for this bundle. So now we can take these, we can take the tape off the ends because we don't need to hold them together any longer. And what we're going to do is we're going to now line up all of the marks on each of these pieces next to one another, and we're going to tape them together, and that's going to give us the opportunity to cut and wrap this area. So line them up so that all the marks are even with one another. Once you get all of the marks lined up how you want them, they don't have to be perfect, but they do need to be kind of close to one another. Once you get that, I want you to take a piece of painter's tape, and I want you to make another flag, but we're going to do this just outside of the area that we're going to file into, that we're going to cut with a file. That's going to give us the stability that we want, but it's also going to hold all these wires together. So I'm putting 2 flags on here. Let me show you. And they're just outside the area we're going to want to cut. Now notice these aren't perfect. I don't have these perfectly lined up. They're just lined up enough to be able to easily cut them. So the next thing we need to do is we need to take our file, and I'm just using a hand file. My hand file has a serration on the sides, a filing edge on the sides, and we're going to file across all 3 of these so that there's about a 1/2 millimeter that we're going to take off, so that there is an area that the wrap wire will sit in and hold this firmly together. So let me do that. I might do some of this off camera because it does get kind of boring. Alright, so it looks like I've got everything. Kind of like to turn it around the opposite direction just to make sure I get this edge kind of even with everything else also. But I've taken about a 1/2 millimeter, or maybe a little bit less, across all 3 of those wires. So the next thing we want to do is we want to now wrap these 3 together. And what we're going to use for this is we're going to use 18 gauge half round wire. So cut about a 6-inch piece of your half round wire off the spool, and take your wire wrap pliers, and I want you to position them right outside of the area that you want to wrap. So it's the long sides holding on to the wire bundle, and the short side's going to go right in between this. The wrap wire is going to go right in between those 2 jaws there, and we're just going to wrap this this little wrapped area here in the center. And you want a good tight wrap on this. So about every 4 or 5 you can set this into place and then continue wrapping. These wire wrap pliers really do a good job of helping you hold things in place, so that it kind of gives you a free hand to be able to use or to wrap this wire and make sure you've got everything where you want them. So keep setting them, and then just keep going till you get to the other end of this cut area. And what we're going to do is, once we get to the other end, we are going to cut off this excess wire, and we're going to cut the excess wire off on the same side as that cut area because we want this hidden up against the stone. So I'm just going to trim off my excess, and I always trim my excess about half the width of the wire bundle. And then we're going to take our wire wrap pliers and just push those cut ends down. And I like to make sure that I've got a good firm wrap. So I always take out my bench block again, and I take the cut area and I put it against the stone or against the bench block, and then I take a rawhide mallet and I give it a good smack a few times with this this rawhide mallet, because what I want is I really want to make sure that I have a nice firm tight wrap, and this is going to help just set everything in place. So give it a few good taps. So now that we've got the bundle put together, you can take these pieces of tape off. We don't need those holding everything together. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to put our prongs together. So we're going to take the prong wires and we're going to move them out about 45 degrees. And make sure you get a good tight bend there. Sometimes you have to go in and just kind of make sure you've got a crisp edge there, because we want to make sure that this stays in place and doesn't move anywhere. So we're going to take our wires, these two now, and we'll bring these guys out. And we'll make sure we get a nice crisp bend there. These are going to be our prong wires. So this is what you end up with. We've got a round wire here that's going to make up the earring, and now we've got wires here that are going to be our prong wires, and that's where we're going to start next. So I've cut another piece of painter's tape off, and I'm going to put this on the wrap. See, I've just put it over the wrap, and we're going to set the stone. Now I flipped it over, so I got the sticky side up, and I want to center my stone on the setting. And once I get it set on there, I'm going to take the tape and I'm just going to bring the tape around to hold this stone firmly in place so that I can mark these prongs. This makes it much easier to mark the prongs. But before you do that, flip it over and just make sure that from the back side you have this centered where you want it, and it looks like I actually got it pretty close. Sometimes, especially if you put this piece of tape directly over the wrap, that gives you that visual aid to be able to know where to center the stone on there when you've got it flipped over. So we want to mark our prongs. We're going to do that with a fine tip permanent marker, and we're going to mark each wire where it comes out from the stone. So I'm just going to mark those wires, and that's going to be where we bend each of these wires to make the prong. We're going to bend them at these points. Okay, so we've got all 4 of those done. We can now take the tape and the cabochon off of the piece. We don't need the tape any longer. So we'll set that aside. So now there's a mark at each prong. They should be pretty close to even. And I want you to just line up your wire wrap pliers just outside. So I'm between the mark and the end of the wire. And that's where I'm going to bend it. And I'm just going to bend it toward me. So I've got my cut sides right there. So this is the side that I've cut the wire ends on. So I'm just going to bring it toward me 90 degrees. I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to position just outside and make a nice crisp bend in this. I'm going to do that with all 4 prong wires. And this will allow me now, once I get all 4 of them bent how I want them, I should now be able to put the stone, whoops, I should be able to put the stone back in the setting, and it should hold the stone in. Now, a couple of these I might have to kind of rearrange. Okay, like this one. The rest of them look pretty good. This one is a little short, so let's pop it out. Let me show you how easy it is to fix that. You just kind of unbend it a little bit. See, I bent it out, and then I just reshaped it. Just reshape it. Make sure you got a nice crisp bend there. And now this stone should sit in the setting pretty well now. And you don't want to make it too loose. So be careful. Yeah, there it goes. So now it's in the setting pretty well. Move your wires where you want them. And then just bend them over the stone to hold the stone in. There we go. So now a couple of these we're probably going to have to maybe rearrange just ever so slightly, but we should be all right. There we go. So there's our prongs on there, and now we just need to trim them. Now trimming them, you want to make sure, now the good thing about this particular stone is it's got a very high side to it, a very high, and it's rather flat as well. So I like to trim my prongs so that they're about 2 millimeters above the stone. So right about here. Now I want you to remember that when you do prong settings like this, that you want to make sure you cut too long rather than too short, because you can always trim off the excess. You can't add wire. So if you're nervous about it, trim them a little bit at a time, and that will help you. And you want them all kind of even too, so if you look at them from the side and you trim it, that'll help you see whether you've got them even or not. Now I'm going to trim these just a hair more. I'm paying attention to how deep I make these cuts. Yeah, okay. And then the last one. Oops, one of these is too long. Let's see which one it is. That one. Okay, so let me show you what we've got here. So I've got my prongs cut, and what we now need to do is we need to shape those. They're kind of ugly and weirdly shaped, and I never like that. I like to make sure that my prongs on my earrings or any of the prongs that I make, I want to make sure that they are kind of a nice rounded edge to them. And so you can take a needle file and you can kind of shape these with a needle file and take those edges off and make them nice and just nice curves to them. And that works great. It takes a few minutes though to do that. What I personally like to do is I like to use my Dremel tool, and what I have inserted here is I've got a rubber silicone polishing tip in here, and these are great to work with for making these prongs because they cut away that metal and shapes it how you want it and gives it a nice bright polish as well. So I'm going to use this to shape mine. I'm just going to take this rough edge off and give it some shape. Okay, so we've got those shaped really well. Now we aren't going to do a final set on the stone, but we are going to kind of dry fit it once again. Just going to put it in. We're going to actually do the final set after we get these moved into place. So it's still, everything looks like it's where it's supposed to be. So what we need to do now is we need to bend these wires to their final position. And I use my finger to make a curl in this. You can use the end or part of a ring mandrel. That works great. If you've got anything else that you use to make something curved or round, that's great also. But you just want to make nice even bends to either side. And you want to make them so that they are pretty much even with one another. And sometimes you may decide that you only want them to be, want the earring to be so high, or so long, should I say. So put your stone back in every once in a while and check. But what I like to do is I like that, like this earring, I think I want to make about somewhere around 1.5 inches long. So if I take and I measure where they're coming across, it's just about 1.5 inches. So make sure that, and then cross your wires at the top where you want these, and then just continue to work on the shape of the earrings. Now I might actually bring this up just a little bit. And you want to make sure your bends are, all of your curves and everything is right how you want them. I've got this one in the wrong place. I like to do this one over the other. Just like that. And then make sure that they cross over in the center of this piece as well. It looks like I've got it pretty close. Okay, so take the stone out, and this is, I've got the wires crossed over one another, and I'm going to take the back wire, whichever one yours is, and I'm going to bend it straight. Mine's not quite straight. Right where they cross over one another. So I've bent this straight. This is going to be for the ear wire. So then take your wire wrap pliers and hold both of the wires across one another. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the wire we didn't straighten out and we're going to bring it around where they crossed over. That's a other good thing. These work great for doing something like this as well, where you need to wrap one wire around the other, because this little cutout area gives you that room to be able to do it. But I just want to coil those together. So if you can see right here, I just bent this one around that one, right where they crossed over, and then I'm going to kind of twist them or push them into place how I want them. And then I'm going to trim off the excess at the back. And then just make sure that that back wire is pushed up against this straight wire that comes out. Also check to see if it's scratchy. If it is, again, take a needle file and go over that area to take that out, that roughness out, so that it's not going to scratch somebody. Last thing you need is somebody to pick up a piece of jewelry of yours and get hurt. Scratch them somehow or scrape them, especially if they're giving these to someone as a gift, or if you're giving them to someone as a gift. Okay, so this is what we end up with. Prong setting. Nice curve here, nice sides. This is going to hold the ear wire. Now how I do this is just like so many others who have made ear wires or worked with earrings such as this. We need some round nose pliers. So I got my round nose. I'm going to take this and I'm going to kind of bend it out just about at a 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to position my pliers right above, if you can see that, right above where I twisted the two together. I'm going to take this long wire and I'm just going to push it around my round nose pliers to make this eye. The next thing I want to do is I want to trim it. I'm going to trim off this excess so we can finish doing this. I'm going to trim it. It's better to trim too long than too short. Keep that in mind. And then we're just going to work on finishing up that little eye. So I'm going to, I may have trimmed that too long, so we'll take some of this out. And then we'll continue to round that eye out. There we go. And then we'll bring it all together in on itself. There, now that should be enough of an eye for us to be able to put a ear wire on. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of making sure I have it all lined up and centered how I want it so that these sit centered. So I also like to do one other thing to this little eye that I just did, and I like to harden it. And again, I'm going to harden it using my bench block, and I'm going to just put that eye on there and I'm going to tap it with a rawhide mallet. And the idea is that you're giving this some strength. And you can do the same to that, but really you just want to concentrate your blows on that eye that you just made. And that should, yeah, that's firmed it up really well. So we can set that aside and take a look at what we've got. So there's our whole setting right there. So now it's time to reset the stone. And I'm just going to put the stone in. And what you do is you work in opposites. Whenever you're doing a setting, a prong setting, you do this side, then this side, then this side. So I'm working in opposites so that it keeps the stone centered within the setting. So I'm going to start actually down here at this bottom end. So I've got my stone centered in here. I'm going to start right here on this prong. And I'm going to put this bottom jaw at the bottom of the prong and then this top jaw of my wire wrap pliers. And I'm just going to push that tip over the stone. And again, working in opposites. So now I'm going to go to this other side. Now this is going to be just a little tricky because we do have something in the way. We've got that wire from the top of the earring is in the way. So we just kind of do the same thing. You get on it at the bottom, push it up over the stone. Now work yourself to the other side, and we're going to finish setting this one. Push it firmly over the stone. And when you're doing this, anytime you are setting a stone and you're using some sort of a tool to do it, be very, very, very careful that you do not slip off of that prong as you're setting it so that it hits the stone. And you don't want to scratch your stone, and you don't want to crack or break your stone either. Okay, so this is what we've got. Now what we can do is we can kind of look at it and make sure that we've got everything right where we want it. I'm going to elongate this just a little bit. And I'm going to also center this top part just a little bit better. So I'm just making some fine tuning to it, but this is what we're looking for. Now there's some things that you can do with this, this part of the earring. Before you final set it, you can add a texture to it. You can flatten it. You can make it firm. That's something else you might want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just set that part of it on there, the earring part, and I'm just going to, I'm not flattening it. What I'm doing is I'm hitting this so that it hardens the wire. And just, again, be very, very careful not to hit the stone. And I'm only putting the part of the wire that I want to strike on the bench block. I'm not putting the whole thing. And I'm also keeping my fingertips off of the bench block as well. So don't be afraid of your bench block. And don't be afraid to harden your wire this way. If you're careful, take your time, it will harden this to where it's not going to move. So there we go. So there's our earring. So hopefully and then just put your ear wire on here, and that will give you this nice, simple prong set earring that's going to really showcase off this stone. So I have one done, and I want to show you what you need to do. You want to make these so that they look exactly the same, and this is just simply by matching it up. So I've taken the two wrap areas and I put them back to back. I'm going to kind of hold them there, and I want to bend my wires so that they mimic what I've already done. I just want to make sure that both of these sets of wires are exactly the same or pretty close to it. You got to remember, somebody's head will be in the middle, so they don't have to be exactly perfect, but they need to be pretty close, just so that they look like a match pair of earrings. And the best way of doing that is to just match them up and then bend the wires so that they match the other. See, so that's just a simple way of doing that. So now I have two sets that I can kind of finish putting together. Now I just have to finish the top. So wasn't that a fun project? Very simple, very elegant pair of earrings. But there are a few things that you can do with those earrings. And let me show you just a couple of them. First of all, the earrings themselves. If you notice the space at the top of the earrings, right here, just above the cabochon, you can use that space by adding more wire to this and using these outside wires as a framework to build a nice design into that. So that's one thing that you can do with these. Something else that maybe you've thought about, but in my 3 myths or 3 things about wire wrapping, I gave you kind of a hint to what else you can do with these. In there I say if you can make earrings, you can make pendants and vice versa. These will make really good pendant designs as well. Maybe a larger stone, a little bit more wire in the center. Make it into the top into a nice veil. So it'd be a great design for a pendant. So that's something else that you can keep in mind. You can also orient the stones differently in here, just by maybe setting it offside itself, or maybe making the stones in different positions. There's lots of things that you can do with this very simple and very basic wire wrap design. Okay? So I really hope you enjoyed it. Please, please, please hit the like button. Please come back again. Share this with your friends as well. And the next tutorial is going to be a really kind of a nice one as well. So please stay tuned for that also. All right? So my name is Jim McIntosh. And again, I want you to remember, practice, practice, practice.